I thought I knew my parents' marriage. 32 years of what looked like perfect suburban love, complete with anniversary dinners and matching Christmas sweaters. Then my mother's midnight phone call shattered everything I believed about my family, and the contents of that dusty attic box revealed a betrayal so profound it made me question every memory I had. The tremor in her voice should have been my first warning. Mom never called after 10 p.m., and she certainly never asked me to keep secrets from Dad. But there I was at 12:47 a.m., flashlight in hand, pulling down the attic ladder while my husband slept peacefully 2 floors below, completely unaware that our quiet Tuesday night was about to become the catalyst for the most devastating family crisis of my life. What I found in that box didn't just change how I saw my parents. It forced me to confront who I really was when everything I thought I knew turned out to be a carefully constructed lie. 3 weeks earlier, everything seemed perfectly normal. I was juggling my marketing job, planning my daughter Emma's 8th birthday party, and dealing with the usual suburban chaos that comes with trying to balance career and family. My parents lived just 20 minutes away in the same house where I'd grown up, and we maintained the comfortable rhythm of Sunday dinners and holiday traditions that had anchored our family for decades. Dad was his usual self, cracking dad jokes, helping Emma with her math homework, and regaling us with stories from his accounting firm. Mom bustled around the kitchen, making sure everyone had enough food, orchestrating family photos, and maintaining the warm, nurturing presence that had defined my childhood. They seemed like the couple everyone envied, high school sweethearts who'd built a beautiful life together, weathered every storm, and still held hands during family movie nights. The only unusual thing I'd noticed was Mom's increased interest in genealogy. She'd started spending hours on ancestry websites, asking detailed questions about family history, and making cryptic comments about understanding where we come from. I'd attributed it to empty nest syndrome. With me out of the house for over a decade, she needed a new project to channel her energy. Dad would roll his eyes good-naturedly when she'd launch into stories about distant relatives or genetic testing results. "Your mother's becoming a regular detective," he'd say, with that indulgent smile he'd perfected over 32 years of marriage. "Next thing you know, she'll be solving cold cases." I should have paid more attention to the tension I occasionally glimpsed between them, the way Dad would change the subject when Mom brought up her research, or how Mom's smile would tighten when he dismissed her interests. But hindsight is cruel that way, isn't it? The warning signs seem so obvious once the explosion happens. The phone call came on a Tuesday night in March. I was in bed, scrolling through work emails when my phone buzzed with Mom's number. My heart immediately started racing. Parents don't call this late unless something's wrong. "Sarah?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, shaky in a way I'd never heard before. "Don't tell your father I called." Those 7 words hit me like ice water. In 32 years, my parents had never asked me to keep secrets from each other. They were the united front, the team, the couple who discussed everything together. "Mom, what's wrong? Are you okay? Is Dad—" "He's asleep. Listen to me carefully." Her voice was urgent now, almost desperate. "I need you to go to your father's house tomorrow when he's at work. Go to the attic. There's a box hidden behind the Christmas decorations, wrapped in a blue tarp. Open it." "Mom, you're scaring me. What's in the box?" A long pause. I could hear her breathing, uneven and strained. "Letters. Photos. Things your father thought he'd hidden forever." Her voice cracked on the last word. "Sarah, I found out who your father really is, and I can't handle this alone anymore." The line went quiet except for what sounded like muffled crying. "Mom? Mom, talk to me. What kind of letters?" "Love letters," she whispered. 23 years worth of love letters. To someone who isn't me. The room seemed to tilt. My father? my steady, dependable, moral compass of a father. Having an affair? It felt impossible, like she was talking about a stranger. That can't be right. Dad would never— Go to the box, Sarah. See for yourself. But promise me you won't say anything to him until we talk again. Promise me. I promised, though every cell in my body was screaming that this had to be some kind of mistake. After she hung up, I lay in the dark for hours, staring at the ceiling, trying to reconcile the father I knew with the man my mother was describing. By morning, I'd convinced myself she'd misunderstood something, that there was a logical explanation. I was so naively, completely wrong. To understand why this revelation felt like the ground disappearing beneath my feet, you need to know who my father was to me. Robert Mitchell wasn't just my dad. He was my hero, my moral compass, the man who taught me that integrity wasn't negotiable and that keeping your word was the foundation of character. Growing up, he was the parent I went to with ethical dilemmas. When I was caught cheating on a test in 6th grade, he didn't just punish me. He sat me down for a 3-hour conversation about why dishonesty corrodes your soul from the inside out. When I wanted to lie about my age to get into an R-rated movie at 16, he explained how small compromises lead to bigger ones, how every choice either builds or erodes the person you're becoming. Your reputation is the only thing you truly own, he'd tell me. Everything else can be taken away, but how people see your character, that's yours to build or destroy. He'd been saying versions of this my entire life. When neighbors gossiped, he'd change the subject. When coworkers complained about cheating spouses, he'd shake his head sadly and comment on how betrayal destroys families. He'd point out couples in restaurants who clearly weren't married to each other and express genuine puzzlement about how people could live with that kind of deception. My parents' love story had been the foundation of my own beliefs about relationships. They'd met in high school, dated through college, married young, and built what looked like an unshakable partnership. They weathered my grandmother's death, Dad's period of unemployment in the early 90s, Mom's breast cancer scare, and all the normal stresses of raising a family and building careers. During my messy divorce 3 years earlier, Dad had been my rock. I know it hurts now, he'd said, holding me while I sobbed in their kitchen, but you're better off knowing the truth. Living a lie isn't living at all. He'd helped me rebuild my confidence, reminded me that I deserved someone who would be faithful and honest, and modeled what a good marriage looked like. The irony now feels like a knife twist. Mom's genealogy obsession suddenly made horrible sense. She hadn't been researching distant relatives. She'd been investigating her own husband. All those hours on the computer, all those careful questions about family trips and business conferences, all those moments when she'd seemed distracted or sad. She'd been playing detective in her own marriage, uncovering a betrayal that had been hidden for more than 2 decades. The worst part? I'd encouraged her research. "It's so cool that you're discovering all this family history," I'd said just the month before. Dad should appreciate having such a thorough wife. God, if I'd only known what she was really investigating. Wednesday morning felt surreal. I dropped Emma at school, went through the motions at work, and counted down the hours until I could drive to my childhood home. Dad would be at the office until 6. Mom had confirmed his schedule when she called to give me the all clear. Standing in my parents' driveway with a key in my hand felt like trespassing. This was the house where I'd grown up, where I'd brought boyfriends to meet my parents, where I'd announced my pregnancy and later my divorce. It had always been a safe harbor. Now it felt like a crime scene. The attic ladder creaked as I climbed up, flashlight beam dancing across familiar storage boxes and forgotten furniture. The space smelled like dust and old wood, exactly as it had when I was a kid sneaking up here to find Christmas presents. But this time, I wasn't looking for gifts. I found the blue tarp exactly where Mom had described, wedged behind boxes of Christmas decorations that hadn't been touched since last January. My hands were shaking as I pulled it free and unwrapped what was inside. A shoebox. Plain brown cardboard, the kind you might use to store old photos or tax documents. Nothing special about it except for the way it had been carefully hidden, wrapped, and buried among the seasonal decorations where Mom would never have reason to look. Inside were letters. Dozens of them, tied with ribbon, handwritten on expensive stationery. The return address made my stomach drop. Patricia Williams, an address in Chicago. The date spanned from 1999 to just 3 months ago. 23 years. This wasn't a brief affair or a moment of weakness. This was a parallel life. I read the first letter with trembling hands. My dearest Robert, I can't stop thinking about our weekend in Milwaukee. You looked so sad when you had to leave, and I wanted to call, but I know you need time to process everything at home. I understand why this is complicated for you, but please know that I'm here whenever you're ready to talk about our future. All my love, Patricia. The letters got more intimate from there. Patricia knew details about Dad's work, his hobbies, his fears about my teenage rebellion, his concerns about Mom's health during her cancer scare. She wasn't just his lover. She was his confidant, his emotional support, his secret wife in every way that mattered except legally. But the photographs were what really destroyed me. Pictures of Dad with a woman I'd never seen before, but who was clearly Patricia. They were at restaurants, on vacation, at what looked like family gatherings with people I didn't recognize. In every photo, Dad looked happy in a way I'd rarely seen at home. Relaxed, genuinely smiling, completely present in a way that now made his interactions with Mom and me seem like performances. The most devastating photo was from what appeared to be a Christmas party. Dad was wearing a sweater I recognized. Mom had given it to him 2 years ago, and he'd claimed to love it. But here he was, wearing Mom's gift while celebrating the holidays with another woman, surrounded by another family who clearly knew him well and welcomed him as one of their own. I sat in that dusty attic for 2 hours, reading letter after letter, studying photograph after photograph, trying to reconcile this evidence with everything I thought I knew about my father. The man in these letters was thoughtful, romantic, and deeply committed, just not to his wife and daughter. Patricia's most recent letter was dated just 3 months ago. Robert, I know you're struggling with telling Sarah the truth, but she deserves to know who you really are. We've built something beautiful together, and hiding it is starting to poison what we have. I'm not getting any younger, and I can't keep living in the shadows of your other life. Please think about what I said about Chicago. There's a place for you here, with people who love you exactly as you are. All my love, always yours, Patricia. By the time I climbed down from the attic, I wasn't just angry, I was hollowed out, fundamentally changed. The father I'd worshipped my entire life was a fraud. The marriage I'd used as my template for love was built on decades of lies. And my mother had been living with this knowledge alone, carrying the weight of this betrayal while continuing to play the role of the happy wife. But I was also furious with her for putting me in this position. Why hadn't she confronted Dad herself? Why was I being forced to carry this secret, to look at my father across Sunday dinner tables knowing what I knew? The drive home was a blur. I called in sick to work, picked up Emma early from school, and spent the afternoon going through the motions of normal life while my world crumbled inside my head. How do you make dinner and help with homework when you've just discovered that your entire family history is a lie? That evening, Dad called to check on me after Mom mentioned I'd seemed off during our brief phone conversation. Hey kiddo, your mom said you weren't feeling well today. Everything okay? His voice, warm, concerned, genuinely caring, made me want to scream. How could he sound so loving while living such an elaborate deception? How could he ask about my well-being when he'd been systematically destroying moms for over 2 decades? I'm fine, Dad. Just tired. Well, don't push yourself too hard. Remember what I always tell you. Your health comes first. Everything else can wait. After I hung up, I realized I was crying, not just for the betrayal, but for the loss of the father I'd thought I had. That man, the one who gave wise advice and unconditional love, was he real at all? Or was every interaction we'd ever had just another performance, another layer of the elaborate fiction he'd been maintaining? I waited 3 days before calling Mom back. 3 days of barely sleeping, of snapping at Emma, of staring at my father's number in my phone, and not knowing what to say. Finally, on Saturday morning, I drove to her house while Dad was at his weekly golf game. She answered the door looking like she'd aged 5 years in a week. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a messy bun, she wore no makeup, and her clothes looked like she'd slept in them. "You read them," she said immediately. It wasn't a question. All of them. Every single letter. Every photograph. I followed her into the kitchen, where evidence of her detective work was spread across the table. Printed emails, phone records, credit card statements. "Mom, how long have you known?" "I started suspecting something last year. He'd gotten sloppy, leaving his phone face up, taking calls in the garage, claiming business trips to cities where his company doesn't have clients." She poured coffee with shaking hands. "But I didn't have proof until 6 weeks ago." 6 weeks? You've been carrying this alone for 6 weeks? She nodded, tears starting to fall. "I hired a private investigator. I know how that sounds, but I had to be sure. I had to know if I was losing my mind, or if my husband of 32 years was living a double life." The investigator's report was in a manila folder on the counter. I didn't need to read it. The letters had told me everything I needed to know. But Mom pushed it toward me anyway. Patricia Williams, 54, divorced, works as a real estate agent in Chicago. They met at a conference in 1999. She has 2 adult children who call your father Uncle Bob. He spends every major holiday with them, every business trip, every golf weekend, every time he's claimed to be working late. He's been with her. The rage that had been building for 3 days finally erupted. "Then why haven't you confronted him? Why did you drag me into this? Why am I the one carrying your secret while you continue to play house with a man who's been lying to you for half your marriage?" She flinched like I'd slapped her. "Because I'm terrified," she whispered. "Because I'm 55 years old and I don't know how to exist without him. Because if I confront him, it becomes real, and I'll have to decide what to do next. And because—" She looked up at me with the most heartbroken expression I'd ever seen. "Because I still love him. Even knowing what he's done, I still love the man I married, and I don't know how to stop." We sat in silence for several minutes, both crying, both overwhelmed by the magnitude of Dad's betrayal. "He's going to destroy everything," she finally said. "Patricia's latest letters make it clear she's done being the secret. She wants him to choose. And I think he's going to choose her." "How can you know that?" "Because he's been pulling away for months. Less affectionate, more distant, talking about retirement and wanting to explore new places. I think he's been preparing to leave, and I've been too afraid to acknowledge it." The front door opened. We both froze. "Linda, I'm back early. Forgot my reading glasses." Dad's voice carried from the entryway. Mom grabbed my arm, panic in her eyes. "He can't know you know." "Not yet. I'm not ready." But I was done with secrets, done with lies, done with protecting everyone's feelings while my world fell apart. "Dad?" I called out, standing up from the kitchen table. "Can you come in here? We need to talk." Mom looked at me like I'd just lit a stick of dynamite, but I was past caring about careful timing and gentle revelations. The truth was already out. Now it needed to be dealt with. Dad appeared in the kitchen doorway, golf clothes still on, genuine confusion on his face as he looked between Mom's tear-stained face and my rigid posture. "What's going on? Linda, have you been crying?" "I found the letters, Dad." My voice was steadier than I felt. All of them. From Patricia Williams. 23 years worth. The color drained from his face so completely I thought he might faint. He gripped the door frame, opened his mouth, closed it, then sank into a chair like his legs had given out. "Sarah, I can explain." "Can you?" I cut him off. "Can you explain how the man who taught me that integrity is everything has been living a lie for more than half my life? Can you explain how you could look Mom in the eye every single day while maintaining a completely separate relationship? Can you explain how you could give me advice about honesty and character while carrying on the most elaborate deception I've ever seen?" He looked at Mom, desperation in his eyes. "Linda, I never wanted you to find out this way. I was going to tell you. I've been trying to figure out how." "For 23 years?" Mom's voice was quiet but sharp. "You've been trying to figure it out for 23 years?" The silence that followed was deafening. Dad sat there, looking older than I'd ever seen him, while the weight of his choices finally came crashing down around him. What followed was the most brutal conversation of my life. Dad didn't deny anything. He couldn't, with the evidence spread across Mom's kitchen table like crime scene photos. Instead, he tried to explain the unexplainable. "It started as friendship," he said, looking at his hands rather than at us. "Patricia was going through her divorce, and we talked at the conference. She understood the pressures of work in a way that I needed at the time." "So you decided to have an emotional affair?" I said. "It wasn't supposed to become what it became." "But Linda, you were so focused on Sarah, on the house, on your own life. We were like roommates, not husband and wife." Mom's sharp intake of breath cut through the air. "So this is my fault?" Her voice was deadly quiet. "I was too focused on raising our daughter and maintaining our home, so you had no choice but to find someone else?" "That's not what I meant." "That's exactly what you meant." I stood up, pacing now because sitting still felt impossible. "You're actually going to sit there and blame Mom for your choice to lie to us for 2 decades?" Dad finally looked up, and I saw something I'd never seen before. My father looking weak, cornered, desperate. "You don't understand how lonely I was. Patricia saw me, really saw me. She appreciated things about me that no one else did. With her, I could be myself instead of just playing the roles everyone expected." The irony was staggering. "Playing roles?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Dad, your entire relationship with Patricia was a role. You were playing house with another family while lying to your real one. How is that more authentic than actually living your real life?" "Because it felt real," he said quietly. "More real than anything had felt in years." Mom stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "Get out," she said. "Linda, please, let me explain. Get out of my house, right now." Dad looked between us, seeming to realize for the first time that his carefully constructed world was completely collapsing. "Where am I supposed to go?" The question hung in the air for a moment before Mom answered with devastating calm. "I don't care. Call Patricia. I'm sure she'll be thrilled to finally have you all to herself." After he left, Mom and I sat in the wreckage of our family's kitchen, surrounded by evidence of betrayal, trying to figure out what came next. The house felt different with him gone. Smaller somehow, like his presence had been taking up more space than we'd realized. "I can't believe I just did that," Mom said, staring at the door he'd walked through. "I can't believe he tried to blame you for his choices." 32 years, Sarah. 32 years of my life, and more than half of it was built on lies. We called my uncle, Mom's brother, who drove over immediately and helped us begin the practical process of dismantling a marriage. Phone calls to lawyers, discussions about finances, plans for how to tell the extended family. But beneath all the logistics was a deeper question. Who were we without the family structure we'd always known? Who was I, if my father wasn't the man I'd thought he was? And who was Mom, if half her marriage had been fiction? In the weeks that followed, I learned that betrayal doesn't just destroy trust, it forces you to question everything you thought you knew about reality. Every family memory felt tainted. Every piece of advice Dad had given me seemed hypocritical. Every moment of apparent happiness in our family photos looked like elaborate performance art. But slowly, painfully, I began to understand something important. The father who had raised me, while flawed and ultimately dishonest about his marriage, had still given me real love and guidance. The values he'd taught me about integrity and character, values he'd failed to live up to himself, were still worth holding on to. His failure to embody those principles didn't make the principles themselves worthless. Mom surprised everyone, including herself, with her resilience. The woman who'd been terrified of existing without Dad threw herself into rebuilding her life with determination that none of us had seen coming. She filed for divorce, started therapy, reconnected with old friends, and began talking about going back to school. I realize I stopped being myself somewhere along the way, she told me one afternoon as we packed up Dad's remaining belongings. I became so focused on being the perfect wife that I forgot who Linda was without Robert. Maybe this is my chance to figure that out. Dad moved to Chicago to be with Patricia. They sent a wedding invitation 6 months later, which felt like the final insult. But by then, the sharp edge of anger had dulled into something more manageable, disappointment mixed with acceptance that some people are capable of compartmentalizing their lives in ways that seem impossible to the rest of us. I've had to rebuild my relationship with him slowly, carefully, with clear boundaries about what I can and cannot accept. He's still my father, and Emma deserves to know her grandfather, but the pedestal I'd put him on is gone forever. In some ways, that's been freeing. I no longer need his approval to validate my choices, and I no longer use his marriage as a template for my own relationships. The most unexpected outcome has been how this experience has changed my approach to my own life. Watching Mom discover who she is outside of her role as a wife has inspired me to examine my own patterns, my own tendency to define myself through relationships rather than as an independent person. I've started therapy, not just to process the family trauma, but to understand why I'd been so devastated by the revelation that my father wasn't perfect. What I've learned is that hero worship, even of people we love, is a form of self-protection that ultimately makes us more vulnerable, not less. So here's my question for all of you. Did I handle this right? Should I have kept Mom's secret and let her confront Dad on her own timeline? Was I wrong to force that kitchen confrontation before she was ready? Part of me wonders if I was protecting my own need for resolution rather than respecting her need for time to process. But another part of me believes that secrets like this grow more toxic the longer they are kept, and that ripping the Band-Aid off was the kindest thing I could do for all of us. What would you have done in my position? Have you ever been forced to choose between protecting someone you love and confronting a truth that needed to be faced? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'm genuinely curious about how others would have navigated this impossible situation. Sometimes I think I handled it exactly right, and sometimes I think I made everything harder than it needed to be. Maybe that's just what happens when there are no good choices, only necessary ones.